Some of us is at least expecting or waiting to see when will we have the first unicorn that is created out of 3 or 4 people, because they were so good at curating and using technology to grow, and there were so few real people behind the scenes to do this.
If you were a founder today, would you even start an AI company, or is the market already too noisy?
It is noisy, and we can see that with working or speaking to companies and also working with our current portfolio. We can see that the customer acquisition cost is increasing because there's so much more competition, and it's because there's so many tools, there's so many offerings, there's so much out there that can help you in growing your business, so to say.
How do you understand that if an AI startup is a hype or it's a real product with a moat?
Timing can beat a lot of other things, right? So, and that doesn't necessarily correlate with hype or with that they have customers and those things. I do think that timing is very important here, and it's also keeping an eye on what else is being built out there.
All right, so hello everyone, welcome to Venture Signals, and we have Stine from Copenhagen,
Yes.
which is one of my favorite cities in the world. So I'm
should
so
come
happy.
Here.
Yes. Hopefully soon. Maybe next year. Why not? So today I'm really excited the questions that I'm gonna ask, because you have a lot of inputs about the Nordic startups, like how they should go global so fast, like AI hype, like the real value, like all these questions. Okay, so let's begin. If you were a founder today, would you even start an AI company, or is the market already too noisy?
Good question. I'm fortunate that I have been a founder 2 times myself. So I definitely think that when you've tried it once, you would always opt for doing it again. So definitely. And I think it's very exciting actually to start companies these days, because there is so much tools, or so many tools. There is so much opportunity also, I would say, in order to create something that actually makes a substantial impact. So if you want to solve real world problems, I actually think there is a lot to be done today. So most definitely.
Amazing. How do you know whether an AI startup is building something real or just something can be copied in 6 months?
Yes, I think if all investors could have one specific answer to exactly that question, I think that it would look a little bit different. It's difficult, right? I mean, so it's both difficult in the sense of we don't know what everybody else is building. It's difficult in the sense of we don't know how the customer journey would look like, or how the offering would turn out to be. So I do think that when investing in early stage, as we do at Alliance, I do think there is a lot of things to be done in order to be sure about what kind of risk you take, and then make your due diligence. And we have spent a lot of time discussing exactly due diligence on how do you make sure it's proprietary, how do you make sure that they know and have actually evidence of what they're claiming and those things. So I do think that in order to answer that, investors has to do more work, to put it short.
And what's the biggest lie that founders are telling themselves nowadays?
The biggest lie? I don't hope they lie. I mean, if they don't believe in it themselves, I don't know who should. I mean, that's the first thing as a founder. You really need to build up the belief in what you're trying to solve is actually going to work. Because if you can't convince yourself, how can you convince investors, customers, and all of those? So I guess it's a balance point between actually truly believing what we're trying to solve, and then having some sort of connection to reality in some way. But I see a lot of bold founders, and I see a lot of people believing in what you can actually build with AI technology, and I trust that they're here to tell the truth, and that they're onto something that is actually interesting rather than fraud, or what you would say, a lie.
Yeah, that's great. And so you have been like investing, so many startups, and you have probably like now special skills to detect like what's hype or not. So how do you understand that if an AI startup is a hype or it's a real product with a moat?
I do think that there is, I at least have learned from both building myself and been investing in this space, is timing can beat a lot of other things, right? So and that doesn't necessarily correlate with hype or with that they have customers and those things. So I do think that timing is very important here, and it's also keeping an eye on what else is being built out there. But I would definitely say that the hype curve that everybody looks at and the hype cycles and those things is still some sort of an evidence that we use. But I also think it's about, having a little bit of peace of mind in that things goes fast, but it doesn't necessarily always go so fast. And I at least learned that myself when I sold my first company and to a very big tech company in the US. And two years after, another big tech company came and asked and said, now they understood the technology that we had built. And that gives me a little bit of comfort in that you might have a sensation of things moves very fast and it's overhyped. But sometimes you don't have to believe in all of that, because maybe it is not that fast as you think, and it will take some time to mature as well. So I hope that those who actually navigate this is those who maybe have a little bit of patience and a little bit of stamina and trusting that they will get there and they will solve the problems beyond the hype and beyond everything, right?
And what are VCs getting wrong when they evaluate AI companies nowadays?
Well, I mean, I think what is wrong with VC is obviously there is a lot of rules and there's a lot of restrictions and there's a lot of constraints, because we have fund models, we have investment strategies, we have LPs, we have fund cycles. And so I think the way that I at least see a fund when they are missing out, it's because it's the end of the fund. It is because they need 25 companies in their portfolio companies, and they just need one more, and they're looking for something specific, so they just disregard everything else. So I do think that what is the challenge with venture is that it's such a defined asset class, so to say, and we act in a certain way. So I can sometimes look at something and thinking, if I had my own money and I was investing personally, I would probably do something different rather than I'm doing on behalf of an entire fund and those things. So I do think that what VCs are getting wrong is when they are too tied to the investment strategy, and that is really what I think where bad decisions sometimes are made. And sometimes good decisions also, by all means. There's this reason why we have a strategy, you need to follow that, right? But it's also, at least I think you sometimes miss out on things.
What kind of questions should every investor should be asking AI founders now? They would probably weren't asking a year ago.
And that's a very interesting question, and that's at least something we spend quite some time on discussing among my other partners at Alliance. I think one of the things is, tech stack. So you have always been very focused on the development team. They had a tech stack, and that was very focused on the technology. But now we also need to see the tech stack in marketing, and we need to see the tech stack in operations, and we need to see the tech stack everywhere in the company, because there is so many tools and so much that can optimize all the way around. And then also a year ago, maybe a little even bit more, was that when you raise capital from a VC fund, it was all about who should you hire and how could you attract talent. Now it's again back to the tech stack and say, okay, so how few people can you actually hire, and how much technology are you able to curate and use and be an editor of, rather than just adding more people. So I think those two things combined is where most of the due diligence questions is centered around today.
Amazing. Okay, so for you, I want to also learn about your perspective. What's still worth funding in AI right now?
Yes. Great question. That is what I ask myself every morning when I get out of bed. I mean, there's a lot of things happening, and you can really see you have the different kind of application layers of where you have infrastructure, you have the hardware, you have more of the agentic part of it, and you have the more sort of consumer-facing part of the application, so to say. And I do think that from looking at various kind of companies, I think that a lot of investors, they now turn towards looking at sort of the infrastructure layer. So what is really fueling the way you build and the way technology is put into production and those things. I think that's really what we're looking at. And then the other question is, and I have been accused of that investors create their own problems so they can solve them by investing into these. So because investors have invested a lot in AI, and AI is fueled by electricity. So, and then now the energy transition is, especially in Scandinavia and in Europe, is very hard, right? And so investors has been accused to say that now you overinvested in AI, so the next problem is where will the energy from this come from? And now we all invest in energy transition, right? So I also think that the energy behind that, everything that has to fuel the AI, is actually also interesting.
Cool. Okay, so when we are talking about the Scandinavia, Nordic, I want to ask you some AI insider questions because you have the inputs. So if you invest in a founder in Scandinavia, how fast do you think them globally?
Well, I mean, that's something we screen very heavily on, because I think Scandinavia is, I might be opinionated here, but I think Scandinavia is by far the best country to build a company. And I think that for many reasons, but I really do think that this is great as a sandbox, as sort of a starting out and to build your company, right, and found it. But in order to scale and get sort of global presence, you also need, as soon as you have something, you need to leave. And I really think that's something we need to become better at, is understanding when is the right time to go out from this very nice protected environment that we have, where everybody knows each other and it's comfortable, right? It's really something we look at, and all of the signals in, like, how much have they investigated different markets? How confident are they that this market will be the next one? How many connections, and have they spoken to investors in those areas and those things? So there's really a long list of the signals that we're looking for in order to see if they're ready to scale globally.
Amazing. And what do Scandinavian founders often underestimate about going global?
I mean, everything. and in that way, because I've tried it myself and I know how difficult it is, and there's so many unknowns, and you need to figure out a way to handle all of these unknowns. And I don't think that is something Scandinavian founders per se underestimate. I think it's something that all founders underestimate, when you have to leave your safe space and go somewhere else. But I do think that's very different, and times are changing, right? So when I had to scale my company back in the day to the US, for instance, we were thinking of US as a whole. But what you have to actually really think of is it's so different in each state, and you have to have a license to operate in each state. So we were really thinking, is it Minneapolis, is it Boston, is it Texas, or where do Houston, or where do we have to go, right? And it was not only by going there very often back in the day to understand how this actually looked like before I actually had an idea of how you do this, right? So I think estimate how difficult it is, and that you're just thinking of, US is just one big thing, right? And that's great. I go to the US. so in that way, and I do think that that will probably also be the other way around, that US founders could see themselves going to Europe, and Europe would just be whatever, So yeah. So amazing. Understanding the granularity of what it actually takes to go to a new market.
Okay, that's great. So you are also currently investing in a lot of AI companies. So maybe you can just give us a couple of examples that you have invested recently, and what is still worth funding in AI, and what kind of categories are mostly you focus on and you think that they're going to be the future, we should definitely follow these categories and these kinds of startups?
We are obviously investing in a lot of different areas around this, as I said before, right? Because we need to put a little bit in each corner of all of the AI application layers, right? And an investment we just announced last week was a company called Newcode, and they are obviously offering AI technology within legal tech, so supporting law firms in becoming much more, let's say, automated, and they're really trying not to just do one sort of solution, but really trying to be an operating system for lawyers. And I do think that is interesting within this space, because you need to offer so much more than just one app that can do one thing, right? So for us, that is very interesting to see it like that it's more like an operating system vision, rather than just let me help you write your emails or something like that, right? So that's one area. So legal tech, I definitely think is a lot of interest, also because it's text-based. So that's the best input for an AI algorithm, is obviously text, because that's what all of the LLMs has been. And so there's also a lot of innovation and a lot of things happening in this space. So I think it's very interesting to be part of that. Another thing is we have also invested in, and the name hasn't been disclosed yet, but I can tell a little bit about it. It's obviously if you look at the numbers and the statistics, you see that a lot of engineers today, that they are becoming more and more efficient, because they have all of these applications and technology and AI available to help them write the code and understand and debug all of these things. So one company we have seen that is really interesting for us is the end of this. So when you actually get into production and when you have to test and when you have to put it out there, there's still not something automated and that can entirely help you actually make sure that things are working. And that's the kind of company we have sort of invested in, to see like how can you also be more automated when you actually are launching your website and your applications and those things. So I also think that's an interesting layer in this aspect as well.
Nice.
I can mention 100 more, but I don't want to bore you with all of the companies.
So if you were a founder today, or would you even start an AI company, or the market is already super noisy? What do you think?
I mean, obviously it is noisy, and we can see that with working or speaking to companies and also working with our current portfolio. We can see that the customer acquisition cost is increasing because there is so much more competition, and it's because there's so many tools, there's so many offerings, there's so much out there that can help you in growing your business, so to say. So it is definitely true that it is crowded. But I would also say that it's extremely exciting. So what at least when I meet with other VCs at tech conferences and those things, I think there is, some of us is at least expecting or waiting to see when will we have the first unicorn that is created out of 3 or 4 people. Because they were so good at curating and using technology to grow, and they were so few real people behind the scenes to do this. And if I was a founder today, I think I would be the one that would try to see how much technology could you actually use and stand on top of and create a big company based on those things. So I mean, I'm excited, and I think if you've first been a founder, I think it's difficult to say that you would never do it again. I mean, I'm obviously not planning to it because I've committed to my fund for many years, but it's always interesting to build something and to do something, right?
Amazing. That's cool. And okay, so what would you make you to tell a founder, do not build this company?
Yes, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, obviously, if a founder has identified a real problem that they think that is a real problem to them, I don't think I would ever encourage them not to do it. But also because not everything is good for VCs, right? So I mean, if you want to build something that is applicable to the asset class of venture capital, I think there is a certain aspect you need to be aware of, right? But I mean, it's just really important to say that the VCs is not the holy grail to everything, and then there is certain things that we invest in, right? But I definitely think that a space that we see that is very crowded and where there's a lot of things happening is obviously within digital marketing. It's the optimization of LLMs and those things. So I at least can see that it's relatively fast to say that this is a crowded space also within recruiting and those things. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, because I have also been looking at investing in some. So it's also try to identify those who then has a different approach to it. But I can at least see that both marketing and recruiting is a very crowded area, so to say. One thing that I really appreciate, and one thing that we really, as you also mentioned, moat, and that is really if you have proprietary data. And I think if you have a certain way of solving a problem or proprietary data, then I do think that you can easily enter a crowded space, because you would obviously have a way to differentiate from that perspective, right? So I would never say you shouldn't try it, but also because you learn so much along the way that where you start is never where you end anyways. So the first product is not the product that you end up selling a lot. So I do think that there is the only way to figure out and learn is to get started. So I would always encourage potential founders to get started.
Amazing. And have you seen any founders use events, communities, or ecosystem relationships, especially well as part of how they scale?
Yes, and I mean, especially in Scandinavia, where the community is relatively small, I very often see that that the community is brought into place, and this is where you recruit from, this is where you get inspired from, this is where you show your products, and this is where problems are being solved. So definitely, I actually think that that's one of the great things about VCs, is that because we cannot invest all the time because we have limited capacity, so to say. It's really in between investments we have to be helpful, right? So I really like to see myself I've committed to be part of this community for the next 10 years of my fund. What is it? I cannot make investments every day for 10 years, but in between my investments, I can be helpful. And I do think that investors need to play a bigger role in actually being supportive and nurturing the community with being supportive. So thank you for asking that. I actually think that that's the role of VCs, at least. The bare minimum.
Cool, that's great. So yeah, and I want to ask you like a couple of things about some go-to-market strategies. So in AI right now, so what separates a company real go-to-market potential from one this is just technically impressive?
So I just need to make sure I understand your question right. That it hasn't gotten to market yet, but it's just technically really impressive, but we don't have any signals. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. If you look at deep tech and a lot of those companies coming out of the technical universities, for instance, there you see a lot of impressive technology, but you have very little signal on the market, right? And there you have to take a bet on, will this be interesting? Also because most often they don't even have commercial people on the team when you invest really early. So there's a very little indication on how that could work out. So there you spend a lot of time identifying the plan and how much they have thought about it. Or you sort of say that come back when you're raising your next round because it's still a little too early. So it's also why you see that deep tech companies raise different kinds of capital along the way. And the more mature and the closer they get to the market, the more venture it becomes because you have the market signals. But in I see a lot of interesting applications, but sometimes I feel it's too risky to invest because we don't have any commercial traction. And end of the day, we kind of like to see that.
Amazing. And how important are like in-person relationships when a founder is trying to sell something complex or category defining?
I mean, and that is actually one thing we discuss quite a lot because, I mean, technical sales also need to be done by really technical people, right? So you can discuss whether they would need more commercial oriented people because what they're really trying to sell is very technical and they really can, they have the stamina to actually convince people to buy this because they built something they wanted to use themselves. So it is a trade-off, but I do think there is a lot to be learned in the sense of that even though you're a good technical skilled person that can convince others, there's still a whole kind of framework and a whole mythology behind actually being a salesperson. And you have to appreciate all of that hard work that goes into actually managing your funnel and doing all of these more sort of, how you say, project management kind of work. So I do think that if you see a founder that with very deep technical skills that also understood that being commercial is also a different journey, then I think it's very interesting, and that's at least what we appreciate a lot. But yeah, I mean, technical is at least what gives the attention and what attracts investors as well, right?
Nice, amazing. Yeah, these are all of my questions. Thank you so much, Stine, for joining. And
Likewise.
Yeah, looking forward to see you soon at somewhere else.
In Copenhagen.
Yes, in Copenhagen. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.